and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Louise Nichols, I'm a textile artist and I live in Cornwall. So I'm back with this video as promised to explain the next stitches in the kit. But before I do that, I just want to say thank you to everybody who came to Craft for Crafters Sewing for All at West Point in Exeter last week. It was the most brilliant show, absolutely amazing. I met so many new people there, people that I already knew. I spent most of my time talking as well as selling. It was just great. So thank you so much to everybody who came and spoke, who paid a compliment, who bought a kit, inquired about workshops, whatever it was. You made the whole weekend and it was brilliant. So thank you very, very much. I want to just make a special mention of Rebecca from Feather Stitch House. Such a lovely lady. We had a really good chat and I felt really inspired to meet her and see her there. She had a stall as well. We'll put the link at the bottom to her YouTube channel as well, because she's doing some lovely things over there. And also Suzie Q, who I know has shared me on YouTube as well. So she came and said hello, and it was really nice to see her as well. So thank you very much. So we're going to switch to an overhead then now, and I'm going to talk you through the stitches. There are 3 different stitches I'm going to talk about: couching, French knots and running stitch. And I'm going to show you the threads, talk about the threads that I use to do those stitches as they are in the kit, in the Seagull kit. Okay. Right, okay, so here we are then. So this is how far I got last time. And I've stitched all my bits of felt onto the Seagull. So I'm going to show you now the couch stitch. I'm not going to do this in any particular order. I'm not following the order of the kit. I just want to show you and explain and demonstrate the stitches. So I'm going to be going from using thread 1 down to thread 4 because I'm going to show you, you see here, this stitch here across the wing of the Seagull. So I've got my needles all threaded up, ready to save a little bit of time. Let me move this over. And on your stitch diagram that you get in the kit, you can see it's shown using this symbol here. And then that relates to the stitches I've used sheet as well, which tells you about the stitch and how to do it. There's a little diagram there that shows you how to do it as well. So that's how it relates to the stitch diagram, okay? So sometimes people ask what needles I use for these threads. So this is, I think it's it's a milliner needle. So it's the same width all the way down. But sometimes also for this thickness of thread, you can see I've got this one threaded up as well. This is a chenille needle. They come in various sizes, and this is a smaller one. This is a larger one as well. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Okay, right, so let's make a start with this thread here. So this is a size 8 thread. Comes off this reel here, but in the kit it's all wound and it's been given a number, and it will tell you what to do with each number of thread on the instructions, okay? And we're going to, as I said before, we're going to do this little bit across the wing here, and it tells you on your felt diagram as well that we're going to go from A to B, okay? So all the threads are at single thickness unless otherwise stated. So I knot the ends of mine. Some ladies like to do a little catching stitch on the back. That's completely up to you. And as I said before, You know, some people would like to use an embroidery hoop. I don't use one, but if you want to use an embroidery hoop, then please do. So I'm going to come up at point A using my felt diagram as a reference, which is about there. I mean, it doesn't really matter, a little bit up or down. So I'm going to come up there, and it tells you to do one long stitch from A to B. So you can see I've come up there, and I'm going to go back in just there. So I've now got one long stitch going across the wing of the seagull. And I tie my knots off as well at the end. So to save on my thread, rather than snipping and then tying, I use my needle, I make a loop and go through as you would a knot, and then hold it tight like that. So I get a nice tight stitch. I just snip that off there, like that. So I've now got one nice tight taut stitch going across the wing. And then I'm going to change to a size 5 thread, which is this one here. So this is a little bit thicker than a size 8. And if you use stranded yarns, you can get all these thicknesses from the stranded yarns as well. But on my thread holder, it's thread number 5. But a size 5, as I say, it's a little bit thicker. And you can see on the stitch diagram and on the image that you get with in the kit that I've done 3 of these stitches using this thread over the top of the thread that we've already laid down. So I'm going to start at the end here, and I'm just going to come up on one side of the thread. So I keep my little over stitches quite tight. So I'm coming up on one side of the thread, and then I'm going back down on the other. Again, you can see it's quite tight there to that stitch that I've laid down. Don't pull it too tight. You don't want it to sort of sink into the felt too much. Move along. I'm going to do another one just there. If you're struggling to space out your stitches, just use one of those fabric marker pens that disappear when you iron it as a guide. And then I'm going to put my last one in there, like that. I always do my thicker thread first on any of the couching. If there is a size 5 thread used, I always use my 5 first to anchor the original stitch that was laid down, to anchor that down. And on another video as well, I'll show you couching around a curve, what I do when I couch around a curve. But you can see those 3 little stitches, and that's just holding that in place. And the same as before, I'm going to tie off by putting my needle through that loop, pulling it down, keeping my finger on it so the knot is nice and taut on the back, then you don't get any loose stitches on the top. And then in between there are these little white stitches. Again, on the stitch diagram, you can see it's where the little lines are there. And that is going back to using that white thread that we used to go around the outside of all the felt. So it's number 1 on here. It's just a general sewing thread. It comes off this reel here. Okay? And it's exactly the same stitch that we've just done with the thick thread. And we're going to do a couple of those in between those thicker threads there. So again, keeping it quite tight, come up on one side. I've knotted the thread again and down on the other, like that. And you're really just kind of doing, I don't know, 2 or 3, depends what you feel you want to fit in there. Don't pull it too tight again. And you can do this one in one go actually, rather than coming up, going back in. You can go in and then position your needle ready for the next one. Can you see what I'm doing there? Okay. So pull it through like that, and then I'm just going to do one more. like that. Okay, and that's that couching now finished along there. So let me knock that off as well. Oh, there we go. Right, so usually when it's a thin thread like this as well, I tend to put a couple of knots in, so it's not likely to come through. Oh, there we go. Right, so that's the couching. Now, the couching is also used on the Seagull's legs on here, and there's some across these little bits of felt as well. Now, I've not used the number 5 thread on these. You can see that's just the general sewing thread used on those, and on here it's a grey sewing thread as well, which is number 3 on here. Okay, so that's your couch stitch. Now, this isn't really a particular stitch at all, but I just wanted to show you this because it's part of the kit. So I'm just going to show you the Seagull beak, how I've done that. On any birds that are in any of the kits, this would be how I stitch their beaks. So I'm just going to show you that as well. That's also using a size 8 thread. So that's this one here. And I start by doing, I'll come up sort of just a little bit beyond the what would be the edge of the seagull's head there. In at the point, like that. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do one on the top there, go in slightly under that first stitch there, and the same again at the bottom there, like that, and just under there as well, because you want to really sort of try and bring that beak to a point at the end. And by coming in a little bit further with that first stitch, it kind of just gives you a little bit of shape to the beak there. Okay, so I'm just going to tie that off as well, like that. Now, onto French knots. People either love them or hate them, don't they? I've been doing them for years. I love French knots. I had a friend at school called Jo who taught me how to do French knots when we were about 16. We used to go round to her house and sit round her table, and she was sat doing these knots with this thread. And when I said, you know, Jo, what are you doing there? And she said, it's a French knot. She taught me how to do it, and I've been doing them on pieces of work ever since. But I know some ladies would prefer to do a colonial knot. They find that easier. And if you don't want to do French knots at all, you can always sew on beads. Little seed beads will do the job just as nicely. So I'm going to show you how I do my French knot. And hopefully that might help anybody who's struggling. I think one of the key things with a French knot is not letting your thread get too loopy or loose around the needle. It's keeping it tight and keeping it taut as you're doing the knot. So I'm going to just show you. I'm going to do one. You see at the top here on the felt. So sometimes, depending on the size of the knot, it will tell you. For this one, it's a single thickness, and I'm going to wrap it the thread around my needle twice. But for some of them, if it's a smaller French knot, it may say to wrap it around once. And if it's a really chunky French knot, then I would do double thickness thread and go round twice, even sometimes 3 times maybe, if I want a really chunky knot. But for this one, it's just single thickness, and I'm going to wrap around the needle twice. It's the size 8 thread again. I like that for French knots. I think it's a really nice thickness for doing that. And it's that milliner needle. I always use these for French knots. Because of it being the same width all the way down, it goes back through the loop quite nicely without you sort of having to shove it through. So come up where you want your French knots, and again, if you feel that you want to mark the spots first, then please do that with a fabric pen if you feel that that's what you need to do. So I've come up where I want to do my French knot, and then I hold my thread quite tightly with my left hand. Obviously, if you are left-handed, you'll do this the opposite way round. So taut with my left hand, round my needle twice, and then I'm not going to go back in where I've come out. I have my needle sort of over just a fraction, because if you go back in where you've come up, you may well pull your knot all the way through. So I just position the needle a little bit further over, and you can see the knot is sort of almost slid down to the point of the needle. So I'm going to slide that right down to the bottom now, push it through, give it a little pull with my push with my thumb, and then I tend to keep my thumb on the knot as I'm, or on the rest of the thread as I'm pulling it through. And there's your little knot there. I find by putting my thumb on it, it just stops it from knotting. So I'll show you another one in the other corner. Just knot my thread again. So come up where you want your knot to be. Quite taut with my left hand, round twice, back in almost where, do that again, back in almost where I came out. Slide that knot down, keeping it tight. Pick it up, push your needle through, and then there's your knot. Okay? And you know what they say, don't you? Practice makes perfect. So there you go. So there's 2 French knots on there as well. I won't show you the middle one because I think you probably get the gist. And then the other final stitch that I use is a running stitch. And for that I tend to use these size 16 threads. This is a Finker thread. They're beautiful threads. I sometimes use top stitch threads as well. Coates and Gutterman make top stitch thread. It's a little bit thicker than a general sewing thread, but these Finker ones are beautiful. So again, on your little card, it's this one here, number 6. So I can't remember whether I said when I was stitching on the felt, but I quite like a long needle. So as long as the thread will go through the eye of the needle, and the eye of the needle is not too big, I don't really think it matters which needle you use for this. Just use something that's comfortable. So knotted at the end, single thickness, and I'm just going to start going around the edge of this sun here. So running stitch is really quite easy, isn't it? So I'm going to come up there like that. So I'm going in, I'm leaving a little gap underneath before I come back up. And I'll just follow the edge, keeping it an equal distance away from the edge of that felt all the way around. And again, if it helps to draw the line on first, then please do. Whatever makes it easier is absolutely fine. Oops. There we go. So I'll just go up to the top. I think we can probably fit 2 more in there, so I'll do 2 there, and then I'll turn around and then start coming back the other way. Get my needle in the right place, there we go. Okay, so I think you can see there it's beginning to build up those lines of stitch around the outside of the sun. So I'm going to go away and finish stitching the rest of the panel, and as I said earlier on, I'll put a photograph of the finished piece all stitched and then the next video will be talking about trimming down the print and putting the loops in using your wadding and your backing fabric and actually making it into a hanging. Okay. Okay, so there are all the stitches now, and at the end of this I'll put a picture of the finished stitch panel on for you to see it completed before we go into the next stage, which will be the next video of putting the hanging all together. So I'll be talking about trimming it down, putting in the ribbon loops and actually making it into a hanging. So that will be the next video. Okay, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.